With MLB news back with another video, and in today's video is going to be overrated or underrated 2020. Which MLB players are overrated and which are underrated in 2020. So if you like this kind of content, don't forget to drop a like, subscribe, and turn on notifications to get notified whenever I upload a video. Link to my other channels in the description below. And let's go ahead and get into this video. Starting off with Jose Abreu. Now I do have we've got the screen recorder and webcam working right now. So, yeah, we're going to do a tier list. Yeah, let's leave a like, subscribe, and, yeah, let's go ahead and get into it. Jose Abreu. Now, Jose Abreu he finished number 2 in home runs this year. Was the MVP for the White Sox, in my opinion. I think he goes in the underrated tier, and he's in the full underrated tier. Now, I should go over the tiers. I think that'd be very helpful. Overrated pretty much means you're overrated. Slightly overrated means you're more overrated than you are underrated. Then properly rated means you're just properly rated. No one's overrating you. No one's underrating you. And then slightly underrated is underrated. You're more underrated than overrated. And then if you're underrated, you're really underrated. So, next is Ronald Acuna. Ronald Acuna, I think he's properly rated. I don't think people are... I mean, he's between slightly underrated and properly rated. I think he's probably properly rated. People know he's good. It's not that hard to know that. People know he's good. Very simple. Pete Alonso. I think Pete Alonso goes in the slightly overrated. And the reason I say that is because he had a down season this year. And last year was obviously great. But this year he had a down season. And I just think he's slightly overrated. Jose Altuve. This one may be a little controversial, but he's going to go in the fully overrated. He is so overrated, in my opinion. Trash cans helped him so much, and it's ridiculous. So, yeah. Is this Brian Anderson? If it's Brian Anderson, then I would go... He's very underrated. Brian Anderson is very underrated. Not a lot of people... I mean, I just don't think a lot of people are talking about Brian Anderson. Tim Anderson, he's going to go in the properly rated. I think people know how good Tim Anderson is, and he's one of the better shortstops in the game. I think they know that. Nolan Arenado. Nolan Arenado is going to go in the properly rated. People know how good he is. Some would say he's overrated because of the Coors effect. Is that true? I don't think so. He hits just as well on the road as he does at home. Now his team, they just don't get the pitching. He doesn't get to the playoffs a lot, which sucks, but, I mean, Javier Baez. Javier Baez is slightly overrated. I think he gets talked a little bit overrated, and, yeah. Trevor Bauer. Trevor Bauer is going to go in the underrated tier for me. Trevor Bauer is a pitcher that I don't think is talked about that often. When you look at that Reds pitching staff, you're usually talking about Sonny Gray or, Luis Castillo. I just feel like people aren't talking about Trevor Bauer enough. Cody Bellinger. Cody Bellinger is going to go in the slightly overrated. And I know this may be controversial, but the reason he does is because he's good one season, then the next season he's iffy, and then it's just kind of a continuous pattern. Josh Bell, he is going to go in the fully overrated. Because Josh Bell, he was good last year, and I thought he was going to be really good for the future for the Pirates. But no, he was terrible this year. Terrible. Mookie Betts. Mookie Betts is going to go in the slightly underrated. No, actually, he's going to go in the properly rated. People know how good Mookie Betts is. They're not dumb. They know how good Mookie Betts is. Shane Bieber. Shane Bieber is going to go in the slightly overrated. Now, Shane Bieber's good. I'll give him that. He's really good. He's a really good pitcher. But the problem with Shane Bieber is the fact that he choked in the playoffs. He choked in the playoffs for Cleveland. And I just think Shane Bieber just a little bit overrated. Charlie Blackmon. Charlie Blackmon is slightly underrated. Just slightly. Xander Bogaerts. Xander Bogaerts is very underrated. He's one of the more underrated players of the game, I think. He plays a really good shortstop. He hits the ball well. He's very good. Matthew Boyd. Matthew Boyd is slightly overrated. I mean, I don't think people expected a lot out of Matthew Boyd, but they expected better than they got this year. Jackie Bradley Jr. Jackie Bradley is going to go in the overrated. He is super overrated. I just think he's super overrated. Alex Bregman, he's going to go in the slightly overrated too. The trash cans helped him a lot. Simple. Next is Chris Bryant. Chris Bryant, again, is going to go in the slightly overrated. Chris Bryant just did not play well this year. And for the hype that he was getting, like MVP considerations, no, he wasn't that this year. So he was overrated this year. Walker Buehler. Walker Buehler's really underrated, I think, just because he plays so good for that Dodgers team. But never's really talked about, in my opinion. Next is Madison Bumgarner. Madison Bumgarner is fully overrated. He just wasn't good this year. It's very simple. He wasn't good. Lorenzo Cain, I think, is another player that's overrated. I just don't see what's so good about Lorenzo Cain. Like, yes, he plays a good field, but he doesn't hit worth a crap. Matt Carpenter, overrated again. Matt Carpenter, whew, he is super overrated. Nicholas Castellanos is underrated, though. He's gotten better in the field, and his bat has always been good. Luis Castillo is properly rated. I don't think people are talking about him like, he's great. I don't think they're talking about him like he's bad, though. Matt Chapman. Matt Chapman is properly rated, I think. People know how good Matt Chapman is, I think. It's just like Nolan Arenado. They know how good he is. Garrett Cole is going to fall in the properly rated again. He got paid a lot. People know how good he is. They're putting him as the number one pitcher. I don't agree with that. Jacob deGrom is the number one pitcher. And Jacob deGrom gets slightly underrated a lot of times. By him not being the number one pitcher in the game consistently on all of these rankings, that's slightly underrated. Nelson Cruz, another player, slightly underrated. People know how good he is, but other people just forget about it when you're talking about that Twins. So, about the Twins, you look at Josh Donaldson, Byron Buxton, other players like that. Paul DeYoung is the next player. Paul DeYoung is slightly overrated, I think. Paul DeYoung is just not as good as I feel like he's hyped up to be. Rafael Devers. Rafael Devers is properly rated. I think people know that Rafael Devers is not the best third baseman in the game, but he's good. Josh Donaldson, I think he fell into the slightly overrated this year. Now, he was injured, but a little overrated this year. I'm going to be honest. In 2019, if you told me, I'd say super, super, super underrated. Eduardo Escobar. Eduardo Escobar is, this year I have to put him in the fully overrated. Like, I thought Eduardo Escobar is really good too, but he was trashed this season. Very simple. St. Louis Cardinals. For the Cardinals, I think he's underrated. I just think he's underrated. Next is David Fletcher. David Fletcher, oh my. And I'm moving my webcam. Jeez Louise. All right, David Fletcher is going in the underrated for me. I just think he's underrated. Very simple. Freddie Freeman, another player that goes in the underrated tier for me. I think Freddie Freeman's so underrated. Because when people look at that, I think they care more about Acuna, honestly. Joey Gallo. Joey Gallo is going to go in the slightly overrated. He gets overrated a bit. Lucas Giolito. Lucas Giolito, slightly underrated. Not too underrated, but he's a little bit underrated. He's more underrated than overrated, and I don't think it's properly rated either. Paul Goldschmidt's going to go in the slightly underrated as well. When he was with the Diamondbacks, I felt like he got talked about a lot more than he went to the Cardinals, and he didn't get talked about as much. Yasmani Grandal. Yasmani Grandal is slightly underrated. I think he's really, really good. Number 2 catcher in the game, in my opinion. That's probably not a bold take, though. Zach Greinke. Zach Greinke is going to go in the properly rated. I think Zach Greinke's not overrated or underrated. I think he's properly rated. Vladimir Guerrero Jr. This one is going to be controversial, but Vladimir Guerrero is totally overrated. I just don't see what other people are seeing with Vladimir Guerrero Jr. Josh Hader falls in the properly rated, though. Bryce Harper falls into the slightly overrated. He's a little overrated. Kyle Hendricks again falls into the slightly overrated. He's not totally overrated, but he is a bit overrated. Liam Hendricks falls into the underrated. Liam Hendricks is really good. He's one of the top relievers in the game. I think he just gets underrated a lot. Aaron Judge is properly rated. If you ask me his rookie season, he's still properly rated, and he's still properly rated now. Clayton Kershaw is going to go in the slightly underrated. I mean, we're saying he's washed. He's definitely not washed. Kevin Kearmeyer is going to go in the overrated. He is so overrated. It's ridiculous. Craig Kimbrell again will get into the overrated tier. He is super overrated as well. DJ Mayhew is going to go on the underrated side, though, because DJ Mayhew is so underrated. He's going to get like a 4-year, $80 million contract. That's what I see happening this offseason for him, though. And maybe I'm wrong, but I think that's what he gets this offseason. Francisco Lindor is going to go in the slight. I think he's properly rated. I don't think people are going too crazy. I think they know that he's the best shortstop in the game. Lance Lynn, on the other hand, goes in the slightly underrated. Lance Lynn is a bit underrated for the season that he had. It was just that he was with the Rangers. Rangers were terrible. Manny Machado, properly rated. Trey Mancini, when he was underrated. He's slightly underrated. I think he was. Nick Markakis is going to go in the slightly overrated. I know that he is very reliable. No. I'm just not seeing it. Herman Marquez is properly rated. I don't think people expect a ton out of him. Ketel Marte is overrated. Now, if you asked me last year, he is in the underrated tier. This year, different. He's overrated. Jeff McNeil, on the other hand, is going to go in the underrated tier. He's so good, and people just don't talk about him being just really, really good for the Mets. Next is Whit Merrifield. Whit Merrifield will go into the underrated tier as well. Whit Merrifield is so underrated. His teammate Alberto Mondesi is going to go into the underrated as well. And then Yadier Molina. He's going to go into the overrated. Yadier Molina is quite overrated, I think. Charlie Morton is going to go in the underrated. He just doesn't get talked about a lot. It's very simple. Mike Mustakis, another slightly underrated player. He's slightly underrated. Doesn't get talked about when the Reds have a lot of other bats in that lineup. Max Muncie is underrated. Max Muncie just doesn't get talked about a lot because the Dodgers have an all-star lineup. Aaron Nola, properly rated. I don't think he's underrated or overrated. Next is Shohei Ohtani. Shohei Ohtani is going to go in the slightly overrated. Now, I just didn't see it this year. Matt Olson is going to go in the properly rated, though I think people know how good Matt Olson is. Tommy Pham is underrated. He is super, super, super underrated. Next, Yaciel Puig is slightly overrated. He's more of a pain in the locker room than his services are worth on the field. Jose Ramirez, on the other hand, is going to go in the slightly underrated tier. JT Realmuto is properly rated, I think. I don't think he's crazily rated, but I think he's pretty good. Anthony Rendon, on the other hand, is going to go in the underrated tier. As bad as the Angels were as a team, they almost made the playoffs, which is sad. But Anthony Rendon is good. Brian Reynolds. This is Brian Reynolds, I hope. Properly rated. Eddie Rosario is going to go in the properly rated. Chris Sale is going to go into the slightly overrated. I just don't. I'm just not thinking that Chris Sale's that great. Gary Sanchez, he is overrated. So overrated. Carlos Santana He's underrated. I'll give him that. Very underrated. Max Scherzer, on the other hand, is properly rated. People know how good Max Scherzer is. Corey Seager, on the other hand. Corey Seager's underrated. He does not get talked about nearly enough. Marcus Simeon. Marcus Simeon is, if you asked me last year, I'm going super underrated. I think I'll go slightly underrated. Simmons. Whoo. Overrated. Overrated. Oh, man, he is overrated. He is not that good. I mean, I know he plays a good shortstop. But, man, he is overrated. His hitting, terrible. Blake Snell is going to go into slightly underrated. I think Blake Snell is very, very good. Jorge Soler. Jorge Soler is going to go into the properly rated. Juan Soto, properly rated. Again, I think people aren't going too crazy with predictions for Juan Soto. MVP, that's obviously his ceiling. George Springer is properly rated. Giancarlo Stanton is overrated, though. Super overrated. Super overrated. Trevor Story, properly rated. He doesn't get talked about enough, so I think I'll put him in slightly underrated. Steven Strasburg, properly rated. I think people know how good Steven Strasburg is when he is healthy. Mike Trout goes in the underrated tier just because Mike Trout is underrated because, I mean, unless you're if you're a non-baseball fan, no one's going to know who Mike Trout is unless someone tells them. I mean, Marcus Stroman is going to go into the slightly underrated. I think he's a little underrated. Eugenio Suarez this year was slightly overrated. He just didn't have it this year. Dansby Swanson. Dansby Swanson is going to go into the slightly underrated tier. Slightly underrated. Noah Syndergaard, he didn't pitch this year, so that's kind of hard to do. But when he was pitching, I think he goes into the slightly overrated. We know he was good, but just Fernando Tatis is properly rated. People know how good he is. Simple. Trey Turner is underrated. Very underrated. Gio Urshela. Oh, man. Gio Urshela. Slightly overrated. Justin Verlander, on the other hand, is going to go in properly rated. Joey Votto is going to go into overrated. I mean, Brandon Woodruff. Brandon Woodruff, overrated. I hate to do it, but I just got to go with it. And simple. Kirby Yates is going to go into the slightly overrated. Now, if you asked me last year, another different opinion. But this year's a different story. Christian Yelich. This year he could go in the very overrated, but I'm going to put him in properly rated. Yes, so that is my tier list for overrated or underrated. If you want to see more tier lists, I do enjoy doing them. So make sure you smash a like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you'll get notified whenever I upload a video. If we get like 8 likes, maybe I'll do another one soon. I don't know when, but soon. Anyways, like, subscribe, turn on notifications when you do subscribe. Thank you for watching, and I will be back with more videos soon.